Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings, and this is my sum up of the Oz series, which, if you've been watching my channel, you know I've gone through the whole of the mainline series. There are some other books published, and there are also books that were published after Baum's death, but I'm not doing those. Anyways, so I was talking to a friend the other day, and a couple of friends actually, and I had been discussing, because we had gotten onto the topic somewhat sideways of the Wheelers, which appear in both Ozma of Oz and in that sequel to The Wizard of Oz, Return to Oz. You know, that 1980s flick that's kind of like a horror movie for kids wrapped up in a vaguely Oz-shaped wrapper. And the thing is that she pointed out that most people had only seen the film. That for most people, The Wizard of Oz is Judy Garland singing and the guy who played the Scarecrow being marvelously elastic in all of his dancing, is the remarkable presentation that the lion gives when performing the various songs that he participates in, the characterization of the Wicked Witch of the West. These are all standouts, and the film is a great, great film. I'm not denying that. But they don't think of the books, and they certainly don't know enough of the books to make comments on details of them, to recall what the Wheelers are, and that the Wheelers are not in Oz, they are in the land of Ev, which borders Oz. Or rather, borders the great desert surrounding Oz. They don't know, any of these characters that we see on the covers of Tik-Tok or the Patchwork Girl scraps, or H.M. Wogglebug, or, anything about Glinda. They don't know these things. And I look, and it's kind of a pity. It's kind of a pity because these books are so collectively unique. They're genuinely positive about people and how people can be. It's obviously not that Baum thinks that there are no bad people in the world, but one of the things that happens twice in this series is the use of this fountain of forgetfulness, which, when somebody drinks from that fountain, they forget who they were, and the ones who do this become as innocent as children. They become fundamentally good because it's a worldview that suggests that most people are fundamentally good, that they can make that choice. And it's a wonderfully positive series, that it's warm and it's comforting, but it's also so delightfully weird. And it's a fundamental of this series that what it's about is just wandering around the land of Oz and seeing what strange things will happen. Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, they fall through the earth and they make their way out through the various weird fairylands underneath the earth. But, that many of these are just strange road trips, and they're just travelogues, and it's such a wonderful character for most of these books to be about just seeing these inadvertent travels unfold. And I love them for this. I also, for the record, of course, adore the initial illustrations by Mr. John Neal, who was the last 4 books that I got off of the Gutenberg project. I probably should have gone to Gutenberg for the rest of them, but you can see those bottom 4, which are the original covers and original art. It's lovely art. It's very, very turn of the century, very, teens and just prior to the 20s sort of art, and it's lovely and evocative and interesting. And I think that that art should be, the gold standard for how these books are illustrated, but that's just my personal bias. The thing is, though, rereading these books just reminded me of how very much I love them. How very much I love the fact that Dorothy is so hardcore. She isn't genuinely afraid of anything. I mean, there are times when she is afraid of things that will happen, but when the adventures come, she just straightens her shoulders and keeps right on trucking. And it's a wonderful characterization because there is a quality to her that is this straightforward courage that's very, very real. That this isn't an Alana of Trebond who, sets out to have grand adventures and is going to be the greatest swordswoman the world has ever seen. This isn't hardcore high fantasy where you're going on some kind of Lord of the Rings quest. These are comfortable stories, and they're fairy tales, and they do follow a very fairy tale sort of logic, which is just so very delightful. I love, in a lot of ways, that Glinda of Oz, which is the last proper book of this series, does have a shout out, does have a reminder of everybody that we have seen in this series. We don't have Polychrome the Rainbow's Daughter, but we do have most of the characters, most of the good guy characters appear in that book, however briefly, and it's just enough to sort of wrap it all up with a lovely bow. But even going back to that, you go right back to the very, very first book, and there, except for Rinkitink, which, as I said, is a strangely standard high fantasy story of, a dispossessed prince on a quest to save his kingdom. But the rest of these are basically all of a piece, and I just can't say enough about how much I adore these books. I love the way that L. Frank Baum starts out thoroughly perplexed in his author's notes. In The Marvelous Land of Oz, his perplexity that anybody would want more, but his delight that they do, so he provides more. His continued perplexity in Ozma of Oz, where everybody said, no, we wanted Dorothy, so he gives them Dorothy. And he gives them Dorothy again in Dorothy and the Wizard in Oz, and in The Road to Oz, and the Emerald City of Oz. And then when he tried to bring an end to the series, people kept on wanting it. And I love the letters that he had received from people that he cites, that he makes the point that somebody asked him what age these books were aimed at, and after having received letters from people, from both little boys having to ask their older sisters to write a letter for them, to an elderly couple in their 70s or 80s, all of whom, people stretching in ages between them, all of whom talk about how much they love these books. And he says, ultimately these books are for anybody who is young at heart, which, for the record, is in the introduction to the film. That this film, after all of the years that these books had brought so much joy to people, that film was to be for those who will be eternally young at heart. And it's a young at heart that bears a great distinction to the one as discussed in Peter Pan. Because if you recall it, the last bit of Peter Pan is the reminder that, Wendy's daughter decides to just fly off with Peter because Wendy had become too old. Wendy was now a grown-up, and she couldn't fly off with Peter to Neverland, but her daughter could, and her daughter left with Peter, and in a way breaks her mother's heart by doing this, and J.M. Barrie says, and this will go on forever so long as children are young and gay and heartless. And it's that comment about how children don't always think about what they're doing to their parents by their ambitions and by their actions, the way that, children have to be free to lead their own lives, as Sebastian the Crab said. But in these books, it's not about children growing up. It's not about the growing independence of them. This is about maintaining wonder. This is about not saying, I'm going to go on this one last adventure to Neverland, and then I'm going to straighten my shoulders and lift my chin and finish growing up. This is the land where Ozma of Oz will always be the girl, princess, queen of Oz, where nobody ages and nobody dies, and that these books will always be there to provide that land of delight and wonder and joy that sometimes can be a little thin on the ground once you're an adult. So I love these books. I love how they take you on an adventure, but it's not a scary adventure. There may be some scary moments, but it's not a fundamentally scary, dangerous adventure. It's an adventure like getting on a plane and walking all over Europe and just seeing what's there. It's an adventure of seeing new and exciting things in congenial surroundings without having this need for things that we are declaring are adventures, without declaring a need to be in deep physical and emotional discomfort, and I think these books are great, and I wish that I could be sure that there were more people who read them, more people who, when you say orc, they don't think of a corrupted elf breed, they think of a four-legged bird with a helicopter butt. To have people, when they think of the Tin Woodsman, they know his corollary of the Tin Soldier. To have people who know about Scraps, who is just as exciting and vibrant, and indeed I think the Scarecrow has kind of a crush on her. And to have this world where Oz is seen as a real place. It's not like the film where at the end it was all just a dream. Oz, within the context of the Oz books, is real. Not real in a just because you're dreaming does that mean it doesn't have to be real sort of way, but a real, physical, existing place, and a place with real magic, and I love that about these books. I love all of that. And, yeah, I think that's all of my sum up for these. I hope this hasn't been too, maudlin or rambly for people, although, honestly, I don't care if it's rambly, because, that's why I call these bookish rambles. Anyways, that is the end of this little sum up of my feelings about this series, and, I have to make some quick decisions, because I have to get reading on whatever it is I choose to do next, which you will find out, sometime in the next couple weeks.